Let me give just a bit of an overview. Let's make sure that background noise is reduced as much as possible. An elder of the church. An elder just...
They told me. She would do that.
Excluded by an elder of the church. Brother Goodman. Let me just give you just a brief overview, especially for those of you who are not familiar at all with the class, of what's happening. This is a class, it's actually a second segment of a class that was begun a year ago. We had a quarter about a year ago looking at Christian unity. That class looked mostly at Scripture, at early Christian history, the earliest divisions that began to take place among Christians, and the earliest efforts to try to bring people back together, as well as looking at Scripture, as I said, that talks about the fact that in reality, there is one body. We don't make it. We didn't create it. And in the I guess you could say the theoretical sense, we can't destroy it. We can destroy the visible unity of Christ's church, and Christians have done a pretty good job at that through the centuries in many ways. That early class a year ago now has followed this quarter by a class that continues the idea of Christian unity, but is especially looking at our own heritage in the churches of Christ. We're part of a movement, historical movement. We're human beings just like every other group, and so we have a history, and there are things that have shaped us and have made us who we are. And we're now moving today and next Sunday to what I would call the two foundational documents. The two foundational documents. One that was written in 1804 and one that was written in 1809. We're going to look at the 1804 document today and hopefully start looking at the 1809 one, because we're getting close to, we've only got 5 more class periods after this. Now, I'm going to tell you this, and I may have to say it again. When I would teach this, especially to undergraduate students for many years at ACU, they would get really excited about these brilliant, almost... Uh-oh.
He's trying to increase your volume on the microphone.
Uh-oh.
Should be good now.
Okay. Thank you. Is that a little bit more obtrusive into your ears? What we're going to look at, and what we would do in the class, is we'd see these brilliant ideas about Christian unity, the simplicity that they try to put forth, to talk about the fact that there is one body, one church, whatever you want to call it, but that there is something amiss. There's something that's not right, because visibly it doesn't look that way, and very often we don't act that way. So these documents, I think, are going to be thrilling and inspiring in many ways. Can we critique them? Certainly. But we'll look at them. We'll look at the first one today. The next Sunday, the next one probably. And then I had to warn my students, okay, there's a time coming when it's not going to look so good, because another attitude is going to come forth, and we're going to have to deal with that too. And we'll look at 2 documents that kind of chart how that is, this movement that today, in fact, in America, there are 3 major church bodies that came out of this movement. This sometimes called Stone Campbell movement, because Barton Stone, Thomas and Alexander Campbell, who we get to a little bit today. But today we're talking about the churches of Christ, us. Used to be called a cappella churches of Christ. There are a number of congregations that use instruments as well. The Christian church, parenthesis, disciples of Christ. They're part of the same movement. And the Christian churches, and Churches of Christ, sometimes they're called that, who came out of a second division between the disciples and Christian churches in the 20th century. So I would tell my friends when I would go to meetings, Christian unity meetings, ecumenical meetings, I'd try to explain to them, okay, this heritage, there are three major groups that come out of this heritage in the United States today and around the world. It's the Churches of Christ, the Christian churches, Churches of Christ, and the Christian church, Disciples of Christ. And they would say, what? I said, the names themselves reflect the effort people were trying to make just to use simple names. We're just Christians. Our churches are Christian churches. We're just disciples of Christ, followers of Christ. Our churches are churches of Christ. They were just trying to use those generic terms and not use names that they believed would separate them. And that is a noble, it's a noble goal, but language doesn't work that way. Okay, so you're the Church of Christ, and we're the Baptist Church, and so we're not the same. Names always tend to denominate. And so, I asked my mother when we were growing up, because I used to hear the preachers in the pulpit just lash out against the denominations. The denominations are bad. And I was a kid, and I went home and asked my mother, what does that mean? What is a denomination? And she said, well, it's like a 25-cent piece and a 10-cent piece. They're different denominations. And I thought, what? What does that have to do with anything that the preachers would be up there lashing out against? It just means you name them. To denominate means to name something, right? So you're denominated Georgia. We don't use that terminology, but that's all it means. And so we're named those things, and the intent of those names was, I think, noble. And so as we close the class in the next 5 weeks after today, we'll look at the other document, and then we'll begin to look at how things developed that pushed us toward probably, at least in my experience, maybe hopefully not yours, Churches of Christ have been primarily known for. And that is, we are united. And if you'll come over here and be like us, we can all be united. And that comes out of a very specific set of events that take place in the late 1800s. And we'll look at the documents where that is explicitly said. And people began to say, yeah, that makes sense. And many of those ideals of Christian unity that we'll see today and next Sunday begin to be reinterpreted, redone in ways that are, in my opinion, very destructive. So we are, again, for those of you who have not been in the class before, we start every class with a period of time of what is called, it's a spiritual discipline called dwelling in the Word. We're going to spend time again today, the same passage every Sunday in Ephesians chapter 4. You have that on the front page of your handout for today, as always. And so we're going to start out with just a brief period of quiet meditation. This is not throwaway time. This is essential heart preparation time for what we'll do in the rest of the class. So, breathe deeply. Pray a simple prayer. Speak, Lord, I'm listening, or something like that. I'm going to read this passage slowly. Just listen for the word or phrase that strikes you today. You're not analyzing it. You're not making a lesson out of it. You're just listening for the word or phrase that strikes you today. As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. What word or phrase jumped out at you without comment, without exposition, without preaching, without trying to figure out why that word necessarily jumped out at you? What is the word that jumped out at you from this passage today? Willie, we'll start with you in the back. What word?
Body. Body.
Body. Nancy?
Live a life.
Live a life. Josh? Unity. Worthy. Prisoner.
Grace.
Grace. Raven? All. Live a life worthy.
Grace.
Prisoner. Grace.
Peace.
Peace. Worthy. Humble. Be completely humble. One. Thank you.
Prisoner.
Prisoner.
Spirit.
Bond of peace.
One.
Completely humble.
Completely humble.
One.
One.
Be patient.
Be patient. She's saying that to me. Gary? Bearing.
Unity through the bond of peace.
Apportioned.
Apportioned.
You were called.
You were called.
Grace.
Grace.
Received.
Received.
Spirit.
Spirit.
Live.
Live. Mine was the bond of peace. There were three of us who at least were caught by that phrase today, but a lot of folks saw grace, one, unity. We're going to hear it once more. This time I would like to ask you what, it could be the same word or phrase. It could be exactly the same word or phrase. It could be something else. What in this passage hits you where you are right now in your life? Something that's relevant to you right now in your life today. And I'll ask you to talk to somebody just in twos and pairs, just briefly. What jumped out at you? What caught your attention that means something to you today? As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. Turn to someone close to you, preferably someone who's not your spouse or mother or father. Just in pairs. What struck you today and why? So as we have been open to this, the word of the Spirit through this passage of Scripture, what did you hear from your conversation partner? Not what you said. Not what you said, but what did you hear from your conversation partner that you thought was particularly good? Let me see at least a couple of hands that will explain what did you hear from your conversation partner. And we'll start right back here. Thank you. And let's see, who else? Let's see. Roberto, you would do yours, and then let's see. Got another one? Bruce can't do it. It has to be somebody who hadn't done it before. What did you hear?
That we try to exude Christianity, but pride can get in the way.
Explain a little bit more about that. Where does that come from?
Sometimes we don't necessarily look like we're thinking good thoughts and all that. Especially, I was talking about at sporting events with my kids. And I wouldn't sit with my husband. But he's a really good person.
I mean, sometimes there are things that are just, they've become so personal that you forget who you are. You forget who you actually deeply are. And and so that gets in the way of the visible unity of Christ's church.
My partner emphasized the one body, and we decided that the body just couldn't be torn apart. It was intended to be a unit, and that if we were trying to tear it apart, then it's on us. And not on God's original plan.
Yeah, when we do anything that makes the one body look not one, not like it's one, then we are violating the will of the Spirit, the will of God, the realities that God has created, the one body, the one. I mean, look at that list. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And right before it, it's, patience. I mean, just look at it. Humble, gentle, patient, bearing with each other, making every effort. I mean, this is not necessarily the human tendency. This is not necessarily the human tendency. It's an effort. It has to be something that we are conscious of. And it's something that I think that we are... one of my favorite passages in the whole Scripture is 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18. because it says that we are being transformed from one degree of glory to another, more into the image of Christ. And in my opinion, again, the perfect depiction of what that means as far as the image of Christ is Philippians chapter 2. Where it says, it's the hymn, it's an early Christian hymn as best we can tell, that Christ gave up being equal with God. He gave it up. He let go of it, it says. He emptied himself and he came and he lived like us. And he suffered everything that we did. He gave up his prerogatives, his power, his wishes, his wants for others. We don't get there quickly. We do not get there quickly. And when I read that passage in 2 Corinthians 3:18, to me it's almost like the stock market chart. You know, you make a little progress and you make some progress and you forget. But somehow, again, in 1 John chapter 1, it says, if we're walking in the light as he is in the light, if we're walking in the light as he is in the light, his blood continually cleanses us from all sins. Now, I've said this in class, I think, before, but I'll say it again. I always thought walking in the light means you're not sinning, right? It's apparently not the case. Because it says, if you're walking in the light as he is in the light, his blood continually cleanses you of sin. So it doesn't mean you're perfect, but you're being transformed from one degree of glory to another. And that's where we have to get. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Spirit in this dwelling exercise. Okay. Now, Barton Stone. Anybody remember this from last week? The picture of one of those revivals. It's a mixed bag. And yet Barton Stone said, God was at work here. He did not believe that the weird exercises that they call the spiritual exercises that he witnessed multiple times, the singing exercise and the running exercise and the laughing exercise and the falling exercise. He did not believe that those were caused by the Holy Spirit. He said that the things that were going on at the time, it would have been a miracle if they hadn't occurred. But he said God's Spirit worked in those circumstances because people were more open, people were more receptive. In other words, God works in any circumstances. He can work in the worst circumstances and does for those who are walking in the light. And so, what was the big problem with Barton Stone's Presbyterian church affiliation? He's an ordained Presbyterian minister. What's the big problem between what you see in these revivals and what his official Presbyterian doctrine would talk about?
They thought you had to be called.
Yeah.
You're preordained.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The Presbyterian or Calvinist doctrine, and Baptists, there were many Baptists who were Calvinists as well, and Congregationalists who were Calvinists. Any Calvinist group believed that God chooses who's going to be saved. You don't have anything to say about it. You're either among the elect or you're not. And it's not your prerogative, it's God's. God's in charge. He's totally sovereign. You don't manipulate God. And that's a reaction against some things that, in the popular mind at least, you can do all these bad things and then go say a few prayers or do some kind of penance and you're off the hook. They're going the opposite direction very strongly. But when these revivals are taking place, they're acting like, the preachers are acting like anybody can be saved. Anybody. And so the Presbyterian leaders in the Synod of Kentucky, Presbyterianism is divided into various levels of elders, Presbyterian elders. You have the presbytery, and then you have the synod, and then you have the General Assembly. So it's kind of like regional or state or national, I don't know. It's kind of like a sports division type thing. But the Synod of Kentucky was populated. The leaders in the Synod of Kentucky, they were old-time Presbyterians, hard-nosed Presbyterians, Calvinist Presbyterians, and they tell these people, Stone and his colleagues, you people are teaching false doctrine, and we're gonna bring you into trial. And so in 1803, the Synod of Kentucky brings them up for trial, and they basically walk out. Stone and his colleagues walk out, and they renounce the jurisdiction of the Synod of Kentucky over them. Now, I want to make sure that you understand something about this. Oh, good grief! I make so careful organization with all this stuff, thinking, okay, we're going to get to this today, and then we don't get there, and so then I lose my stuff. But they wrote a document. Stone and his friends wrote a document, basically said this is an apology for us withdrawing from the Synod of Kentucky. Basically, they pulled out of the Presbyterian Church.
By apology, you mean explanation.
Exactly. Yeah. Not we're sorry. We didn't mean to. No, not that kind of apology. This is a technical term that means this is why we did it. But here's how they closed that document. Listen to this carefully. They explained why they got out. They explained why they couldn't stay under the jurisdiction of the Synod of Kentucky. But listen to what they say at the end of this. Our affection for you, talking to their Presbyterian folks, our affection for you as brethren in the Lord is, and we hope shall ever be, the same. Nor do we desire to separate from your communion or to exclude you from ours. I'm talking about the Lord's Supper, which was a big deal. It's not a formality, just a little thing that you do because you have to. It's a big deal. We ever wish to bear and forbear. That's a good term from Ephesians 4. In matters of human order or opinion, and unite our joint supplications with yours for the increasing effusions of that divine Spirit, which is the bond of peace. Several of us focused in on that phrase today from Ephesians 4. With this disposition of mind, we bid you adieu, until through the providence of God it seemed good to your reverend body to adopt a more liberal plan regarding human creeds and confessions. Basically, they're talking about the Westminster Confession of Faith, which is the Calvinist Confession of Faith. Now, did you hear what they said? They did not go out saying, we renounce you. You are wrong. We can't stay with you because you are evil and wrong, and we can no longer be part of you because you're not even Christians. They didn't say that. They said, our affection for you as brethren in the Lord remains the same. And we don't really want to separate from your communion or you from ours or exclude you from ours. We want to bear and forbear in matters of human order. We have to get out because if we stay, you're going to spend a lot of time that you could be doing good things, helping people, trying to try us and get up charges against us and spend all the time that you have to, spending time and money, getting all these charges together, and it's going to distract you. And we'll be distracted from the kinds of evangelism which we believe we're called to because we're trying to defend ourselves. We're just going to have to separate until you can come up with as he says, until through the providence of God it seemed good to your reverend body to adopt a more liberal plan.
In good old boy terms, we're getting out because we don't want you to waste time trying to fix us.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of putting it.
And we'll be back when you get your act together.
Whenever it's not going to cause friction, whenever it's not going to, he says, we love you just like we did before. Our affection for you is brethren in the Lord. Now, that's not the way divisions normally happen.
But it was divisive nevertheless.
Well, it was in the sense that they had to say, we can't, in our judgment before God, our spiritual understandings, we can't stay in that position because it's going to distract us from what we should be doing.
Well, the other is that the ones who were trying to hold them responsible were in essence kicking them out because
They were
doing it acrimoniously
Yeah.
by charging them.
Exactly. They had already brought charges against 2 of the 5 that were with Barton Stone. So 2 of the other 5 revivalist preachers. And they were pretty sure that at that meeting of the Synod of Kentucky that they were going to vote to kick them out. But before they could do that, they said, we're going to withdraw.
What did that mean if they were kicked out?
It meant that they were no longer considered to be ordained ministers in the Presbyterian Church.
So would that mean a cessation of support or?
Yeah, absolutely. They would lose their support. They would lose their means of livelihood. They would have no salary. And they would also be prevented from going somewhere else unless some individuals just decided, well, we love you and we're going to support you.
But that's exactly what happened.
Well, eventually that's what happened.
Would that also mean that those, if a community of Christians chose you,
Take one of these.
chose you as our minister, we would also reject that community of Christians that you're preaching to?
I mean,
I'm trying to think.
yeah, I mean, there are implications. There are implications, yes. There are implications. I don't know how much, if everyone would get a copy of this document that I was referring to, the Last Will and Testament of the Springfield Presbytery. Last Will and Testament of the Springfield Presbytery. We've got plenty for everyone. Everybody just take one copy of the Last Will and Testament of the Springfield Presbytery. Everybody should have their own. And if you need a pencil or pen to mark things off, one more here. Thank you.
He's getting in because you're.
And everybody should have their own. Next
You
more.
live a life where
One more here.
you think that
Down here. Yeah, absolutely.
No, he didn't down there, but he put it on himself.
There you
It
go.
kind of has a double.
Any
thing on
extras?
there. I think I
Whoops.
see what Doug's saying now.
Any
I think that
extras?
he's referring to them.
Thank you. Everybody have a copy?
For the Lord, then.
Thank you.
You live a life where
Now, what I was just talking about happened in 1803. They withdraw from the Synod of Kentucky. Now, what did they do when they withdraw from the Synod of Kentucky? They formed their own Presbyterian church. They formed the Presbytery of Springfield, or Springfield Presbytery. Now, Springfield was today it's a little tiny town outside of Cincinnati. But one of the preachers in their group preached at the church at Springfield, Ohio. And so they said, well, there were at least, because some of them had more than one church. And again, Barton Stone gets up before his 2 churches, Concord and Cane Ridge, and says, I'm sorry, I'm no longer recognized as a minister because the Synod has basically said we're not. And so we've withdrawn and so forth. But they continued to say, we're going to support you anyway. Because we love you. We know. Now, they didn't support him very well. He was on the edge of poverty his whole life. In fact, he would go out and be gone on a preaching trip for a week, and then he'd come back, and then he'd have to go out and plow at night. He was a farmer. He would have to go out and plow at night to get the weeds out and get all the stuff that he was supposed to be working on done as far as the farming operation, so he could have at least something to keep going, a little bit more than what he had. But as far as the religious ministerial part of it, it didn't slow him down at all. Now, that was 1803. In 1804, they began to think, the 5 of them are meeting at the Cane Ridge Meeting House, and a couple of other people are there at the same time. And they said, okay, here's what we had intended. When we withdrew from the Synod and we formed the Springfield Presbytery, here's what we had intended. That we could have fellowship with all other Christians. I mean, we want to have fellowship with all other Christians. But it's not working. because everybody looks at us as a new denomination. You're this and not that. You're not part of the Presbyterian Church USA, Synod of Kentucky. You're part of whatever that is. It's an independent presbytery, Springfield Presbytery. Now, they had been preaching and they had been establishing churches. It was growing. The Springfield Presbytery is growing. But their intention of creating Christian unity had not been realized, because in their mind, naively, they thought, okay, now we can have fellowship with all of the Christians who will have fellowship with us. But the Baptists didn't want to have any fellowship with them. Methodists didn't want to have any fellowship with them. I mean, at the Cane Ridge meeting in 1801, just 3 years before, Methodist preachers, Baptist preachers, Presbyterian preachers, all preaching on the campground, all having that part of the revival. But it wasn't working anymore. And they said, what are we going to do? And what they did was write this little odd document called the Last Will and Testament of the Springfield Presbytery. They killed it. They killed the Springfield Presbytery. You say, well, what do you mean killed it? Okay, I'm sorry. I think everybody in the room is literate. But I'm sorry to make you read. But I'm going to ask you to read. I'm going to ask you to read through this document. Yeah, I know, it's 2 pages long. If you don't want to get to that last part that witnesses address, just forget that. But if you read the first part, and there are 2 or 3 things in there that I left out because they have so much to do with the local context. It mentions somebody's name. I just took that out. But read through this, mark it up. Anybody who needs a pencil or pen, anything that jumps out at you as particularly inspiring, striking, just underline it or circle it. And we're going to take, in about 3 minutes, we'll take some time of sort of hearing from what struck you. Okay, just in whatever groups you want to get in. Doesn't make any difference. Let's take about a minute and a half. What struck you? Just talk in groups of whatever number, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever's there. What struck you? And then I want to hear from several of you. Okay?
So we're killing it in this. This is just kind of the justification.
So this is the last will and testament. The Spirit is moving again. At least some Spirit is moving. Yeah.
Item.
So this is a last will and testament. When do you write a last will and testament? It's right before you die, or at the time of death. This is what we will to happen as the Springfield Presbytery. So what did you see that really was striking to you?
I found the language itself is pretty like old English.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit to really comprehend what they're saying.
Yes.
A lot of it, we will, but it's not. We will. We want you to.
Yeah. Okay. What else? What did you like? Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I don't know, like it, just struck me
You're right.
that kind of the 3 things that I grew up associating with the Church of Christ. Well, the name is in there, the Church of Christ.
Right.
The idea that it's Bible-based, and then finally that every group was kind of autonomous, that there was autonomy.
Yeah.
Those 3 things.
Good, because those are 3 things that were definitely not part of what other denominational groups would have. And they wouldn't have thought of such thing. Autonomous congregations, of course, frankly, the Bible doesn't think of such a thing either, but that's an American ideal. What else? Yes, Bruce?
I found the last item on the first page to be rather humorous. If you find any, and I think they're saying, if you discover any other heretics like us, please kick them out immediately so they can, in order that the oppressed may go free and taste the sweets of gospel liberty.
Yeah, I think that James makes a point, and I've read this so many hundreds of times that I forget. Yeah, this is 19th century language. And you know, first time somebody reads this stuff, what does that mean? But let's look at that first one. We will, that this body, that is the Springfield Presbytery, die, be dissolved, and sink into union with the body of Christ at large. We just want to be with all other followers of Christ, because there's just one body. How can we do that? Well, they were struggling. They were trying to figure out, how can we do that? How can we actually make it that way? How can we actually reflect that? How can it actually be visible? And they're struggling with it. We're going to get rid of the second one. We're going to get rid of our name, Springfield Presbytery. And they struggled with that one. Well, what are we going to call ourselves? Well, you know what they decided? They decided they'd call themselves Christians. So they're just going to call themselves Christians, and their churches Christian churches.
You're in Alabama with your family, and they are there all the time.
Yes.
And sometimes they're visiting us.
Yeah. Now this is 100 years ago before my family started.
That's right.
Yeah. So. Well, this is the legacy. We're almost out of time, so let me get a couple more points. Go down to laws. Instead of the presbytery or the synod or the general assembly making laws for us, it's going to be all that delegated authority. That's going to be done away with. Westminster Confession, no. Internal government, autonomy. Preachers supported by free will offerings, not from the presbytery. Look at the next to the last one on the front page. I like that one just about the best. The front page, next to the last one. We will that preachers and people cultivate a spirit of mutual forbearance. Preachers and people cultivate a spirit of mutual forbearance. Pray more and dispute less. I really like that one. And then if you'll turn to the back page, you probably didn't have time to get to that. At the very, very bottom, we heartily unite with our Christian brethren of every name. It doesn't make any difference if you're Presbyterian or Methodist or Baptist or Congregational. Every name. We heartily unite with our Christian brethren of every name in thanksgiving to God for the display of His goodness and the glorious work He's carrying on in our Western country. This means out there on the frontier in America, which we hope will terminate in the universal spread of the gospel and the unity of the church. We're going to work with everybody who's working for this. The gospel to be spread and the church to be visibly united. Jerry?
It seems to me that all of these efforts to promote unity resulted in further division. And I'm wondering if we have a faulty understanding of the word unity.
I think that you have hit on something absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial. I think that when you look at the work that Stone and his folks were doing in the larger picture, at least the ideal, they were getting close. Because you don't have to agree with everybody on every doctrinal point. You don't have to agree with everybody on the name. You don't have to, but any Christian who is manifesting in their lives the fruit of the Spirit, I mean, that's the certification of a Christian, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, etc., Galatians chapter 5. Not, can I assent to a list of 27 propositions, doctrinal propositions? That's not the criteria. That's not the test. That's not the certification of who's a true Christian, quote. But we will heartily unite with anybody, any other Christian. And thanking God for what's going on here now. And we hope that this will terminate in the universal spread of the gospel and unity of the church. I think that they're struggling with it. And I think that's one of the pieces that we're going to have to deal with before we leave the class at the end of May. Blessings. I pray that we will continue to have in our hearts a deep desire for the visible unity of Christ's church. Does that mean that we have to stop calling ourselves Northside Church of Christ and not go here? No, it does not. It does not. It is an attitude. It is a mentality. It is a spiritual stance. How do we make that operational is the question. See you next week.